Hello and welcome to the very first edition of TheFlourMan.
TheFlourMan, TheFlourMan, you're not ready for TheFlourMan. TheFlourMan makes good things with flour. TheFlourMan, TheFlourMan, you're not ready for TheFlourMan. I love his food. Please give me some more.
Now, TheFlourMan, why TheFlourMan? Because I love flour. Well, not the raw ingredient itself, but I like the fact that it's so versatile and it can make so many different things, from pastries to breads to cakes, you name it. Flour is probably at the root of it. So over the course of the next few weeks, few months, who knows, maybe even years, I'm going to take you through how to make some very basic things as well as some quite exciting things, all with flour at the core. Now today I'm going to start off with something quite basic, how to make a wholemeal loaf. But not just a wholemeal loaf, I'm going to try and make a super soft wholemeal loaf. Sometimes when we have wholemeal bread, it can be a little bit coarse, a little bit dry. But I know a couple of techniques, a couple of ways in which you can make a wholemeal loaf that is very nutritious, very healthy, but also very, very soft and very tasty. So I'm going to take you through that today. Okay, our super soft wholemeal loaf. Let me just talk you through some of the ingredients first of all. The key ingredient, if I'm the TheFlourMan, the key ingredient of each one of these dishes has to be the flour. So for the flour I'm using a medium grade wholemeal flour. Now flour comes in a million different types. You can have anything from white flour to 100% wholemeal flour. You can have flour which is quite fine, some flour which is ground quite coarse. This is a medium wholemeal flour. Depending on what kind of flour you use, some of the ingredients, the quantity may change slightly, but so we have our flour. I'm not going to measure things out in terms of weight, but I'm going to measure things out in terms of cups and spoons, so it makes it much easier for you to be able to measure the ratios yourself. So I'm using, I've got 4 cups of flour in total, 3 cups in here, and I've got 1 cup here which I'll be adding in a little bit later. This is 1 cup official measurement, which is 250 mils, okay, in terms of a liquid amount. I have some salt, essential in making bread, a little bit of sugar, again an essential requirement. I'm using fat. Now, fat-wise, you can use a variety of different things. Different types of fats give slightly different types of flavour. I'm going to use regular margarine. This one's a Vitalite. Now, be careful when you check the Vitalite or you check the margarines, because they have different fat contents, and according to the amount of fat that's in the actual product, can have an effect on the type of bread you have. Now, this one has something like 55% fat. So, although it's margarine, you think it's got a lot of fat in it, it may not have as much as you think. So, it's a Vitalite I'm using, and I'm using some fast action yeast, just standard one from Hovis, and I've got some warm water. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my dry ingredients. So I'm going to start off with the salt. I'm going to pour about a teaspoonful and a half, rough estimates. Sugar, I'm going to have about 3 spoonfuls. This is not actually enough to make the bread sweet, but it will play a part in the consistency and the baking process. Next, I'm going to add about 2 teaspoonfuls of dried yeast. Now again, this can vary a little bit more, a little bit less according to the kind of flour you're using, but 2 heaped teaspoonfuls for me. 1. 2. That's more or less 2. Now these packets of 7 grams contain roughly 2 teaspoonfuls actually, so you could probably just empty the whole packet in. That's just about 2 actual teaspoonfuls. Okay. Next I'm just going to mix the dried ingredients together, just to make sure the yeast and the flour and the sugar and everything is all evenly distributed throughout the flour. Nicely mixed through. Now, next I'm going to add the fat. Now for the fat, for this much flour, I'm going to add, roughly speaking, about 3 spoonfuls of the margarine. Okay. 1, 2, the next part is a part where you can't avoid getting your hands dirty. This is the part where we start to add the water. Now, although I've got 3 cups of flour in here, the way I do it, which way I think helps produce some really soft bread, is that when you're mixing it in the water, if you make the consistency quite wet, quite sloppy, if you like, quite malleable, and then check that against the addition of flour, then gradually you can just add in just the right amount of flour, just to make it thick enough so it doesn't stick to your fingers. But you still got quite a pliable, soft dough. I reckon sometimes if the dough itself is too stiff, because you haven't quite put enough water into it, then I've discovered that the loaf itself can be a little bit dry. So I'm just going to clear a bit of space first of all, and add the water. Okay, I'm back now, got a measuring cup. So I'm going to feed in roughly 2 cups of water. Now this is warm water. And then I'm going to start the mixing process off initially with a spoon, just to start to mix it together. But pretty soon, especially as I've used margarine and not oil, I'm going to have to get my hands in there, and it's going to get very sticky very quickly, but that's okay. Okay, so that's just taken in the majority of the water. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to start getting my hands in, but I'm going to pause a second and move the camera a little bit closer so you can see the kneading process. Okay, I'm just focusing more on the consistency now. I'm about to get my hands in. As you can see, it's a little bit stiff. A lot of the water's been absorbed, but now I'm going to get my hands in. Everyone's probably got their own kneading technique. I find just a grab and a squeeze, especially as you get hold of the fat and everything, and really start to work in, is a good way of mixing all the ingredients very effectively. Good kneading is an essential part to good bread. Makes the bread smoother and helps make it softer as well. So you need to knead the bread thoroughly. Now this is quite hard work, a lot harder than you think. For those of you who haven't made bread before yourself at home, you'd be surprised. It's not a bad workout. I don't know exactly yet how many calories you burn, but maybe that's something I'll do in another episode, how much calories you burn whilst making bread. I call it the bread workout. But for now, all I'm doing is mixing all the ingredients. As you can see, it's very, very sticky. It's not very dough-like at the moment, but all the ingredients are being mixed perfectly. Next, I'm going to scrape off my hands. And now, so far I've got 3 cups of flour in here. What I'm going to start to do now, in order to make it into more of a dough as opposed to just a sticky substance, is start to feed in some of the other cup of flour. Now if I put the other flour in straight away, then the mixture will be way too stiff. But as I start to knead it, especially on the table, I'm going to start requiring more and more flour. Now if I started off with 4, you'd be surprised that by the time you've added the flour to stop the bread from sticking when you're kneading it, you may end up adding a whole nother cup, which changes the consistency again. So this way, it helps you keep on top of exactly how much flour I'm using. It's not an exact science. I mean, every single batch of flour is slightly different, but these are some very rough guidelines. So we've got something you can see. It's very, very sticky at the moment. So now I'm going to start to feed in a bit more of the other cup that we had. And as I start to work this in now, you can see it starts to develop more of the consistency of dough that you're probably more familiar with. Now in terms of a kneading technique, I take it up from the bottom, press it down with a palm of my hand and repeat, trying to make sure that I really work well in. Now initially it'll seem dry, but the more you work it in, the liquid in the dough is kind of first forced out, it starts to become sticky again. Not for you to get in there, it takes a little bit, see? More like dough, but still a bit sticky. So in a minute I'm going to add some more flour. See that? Sticking to the hands again. So now, bit by bit, as I'm kneading, I'm adding in the flour. And before you know it, you would have added in that 4th cup, but in a very controlled way. And again, if I achieve the desired consistency between now and then, I can always stop. You don't have to put in the full 4th cup. So I've used about 1/3 of my 4th cup so far, and I'm starting to get the kind of consistency that I'm looking for. Now in a minute, I'm going to transfer the bread from the bowl and start to knead it a little bit stronger, this time on my bread board surface. So, okay, now I'm going to transfer this. Right. Okay, now, again, so far I've used about half of my cup. And now, one or two hands, fold it in, press down. Again, plenty of flour to stop it from sticking. And you repeat this process for about 5 minutes until it's nice and smooth. You may or may not use up the full amount of that 4th cup, but that's not quite as important as making sure you get the right consistency and you're kneading it really well. Don't be afraid to put some real effort into it. This is the workout part of the making the bread. The beautiful thing about making bread this way is that you know all the ingredients, you know what's in it. It's a good honest loaf. There's no stabilizers and different things and preservatives that you get even when you go to buy fresh bread or bread from the supermarket. You know all the ingredients in here. Very simple. And if you buy your flour in large sacks, as I do, then it works out much more economical than paying either £2 or £3 for a big loaf of bread, or $5 or whatever if you're viewing this in the US. Alright, this is starting to get somewhere. What I'm going to do, I'm going to work this bit of dough for a few more minutes, and then we'll go to the next stage. Okay, and we're back. So we have our perfectly formed dough. Nice, soft, pliable, smooth consistency. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave it to rise. Now it's essential that the dough rises because that helps with the lightness process. Now there's two ways of rising. You can rise it so it just doubles in size, which is what we're going to do next. And then sometimes people have the process of what we call knocking it back, whereby after it's risen, you re-knead it and then rise it again. And that's the process I'm going to use today. Now I don't always use that process, but I found that this is the way to help get super smooth and super soft wholemeal bread. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to lightly oil a container, a glass bowl. Now I'm oiling it lightly because I'm going to put the bread in here, and as it's rising, what I found is that if you don't oil it, it will stick, and then in trying to get it out of the bowl, you can end up knocking quite a lot of the air out of it, which I don't really want. Okay, so I'm just going to oil the bowl first of all, so it doesn't stick. Then I'm going to pop it in. Next, I'm going to cover it with cling film. Again, the cling film itself, I'm going to oil, so that when the dough rises right to the surface of the bowl, and it's touching against the cling film will be easy to remove because of the oil. If you don't oil it, you may find the same process of trying to peel the cling film off. So I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to the top of the cling film, just to prevent it from actually sticking to the risen bread. Now these are all tips that I've acquired over time through, to be honest with you, through trial and error. So if you can follow some of these tips, you could cut out on some of my errors and just get straight to the good stuff. Okay, I'm just going to lightly leave it over just like that, and then I'm going to leave it to rise. Now if you have a particularly warm room, you can leave it there. If you have a closet or anything that's particularly warm, again, this isn't a badly warmed room, so I'm just going to leave it in this room, and we're going to pick this up in about an hour or longer. But the essential thing is, I'm going to pick this up when this dough here has doubled in size. Now this amount of dough should literally fill the whole bowl completely. So we'll pick it up when it's done that. Okay, and we're back, and as you can see, as we just take the top off this bowl, first of all, the oil that we put in the cling film is allowed to come off very easily. And the next stage is to re-knead this. Now the process of re-kneading or taking the air out of it is called knocking back. You can see it's sort of shrinking back as we speak. See that? It's just shrinking back up. We're just knocking some of the air out of it. The next part is we're going to re-knead it. Re-knead it. This is the proving process of the breaking of the bread. Now, not every time I make bread I use this particular technique. Sometimes I just let it rise at once and then stick it in the oven. And you get a decent result. But this time I'm going to go over this process because I found this is the way that makes the bread extremely soft. So, first thing is take it out. And as you can see, the oil helped it come out nice and easily. Now I'm going to re-knead it the second time. Now I'm not going to knead it quite as aggressively as the first time, but I'm just going to take a little bit of the air out, re-knead it. We're not going to use an awful lot of flour for this because the dough is fundamentally the same as it was before. We're just knocking back, taking some of the air out of it. Make sure there's no big air pockets or anything in. Sometimes the bread can appear nice and inflated, but then when you bake it, it's got big air pockets in it. We don't really want that. We want a nice, smooth, maybe fine texture to the bread, so I'm not going to knead it too long. Just for about 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to knead this about maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll go to the shaping stage. Okay, so we've shaped our loaf the second time, so now we're going to allow it to rise the second time for about 30 to 60 minutes. Again, this depends on the temperature of the room. Now I'm looking for the loaf to expand to not quite double, but easily out towards the edges, circumference wise, of this particular pan that it's on. So I'm going to leave this now. I'm going to cover it with the same cling film that we had before, just to make sure that the outer surface doesn't dry out. Now you can also use, if you have like a clean damp cloth, you can put it over. That works very well as well. So you can, but the main thing is you don't really want the air to get to it, or it will start to form a bit of a crust on the outside. We don't really want that. So I'm just going to leave it now for about 30 to 60 minutes, but again, mainly until it's swelled up to the kind of size that I'm looking for, and then we'll pick this up a little bit later. Nice and dome-like. I'm just going to shape it slightly. I want to make sure that it's a perfect shape, because obviously when it rises, it doesn't rise completely evenly. So I'm just making sure I'm shaping it so I'll get a nice dome-like shape before I take the plastic off it. Beautiful, okay. Now, we're not long now. All I'm going to do is I'm going to score it in a cross so that when it bakes it will blow out and you get that classic farmhouse look. So that will do. Next I'm going to put it in the oven for about about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. It will vary according to the temperature of your oven. So about 30 minutes. So I'm going to be checking it after about 20 minutes. I'm looking for a nice, even brown tone. I'm going to put it on about 180 and then we'll check back in about 20 minutes and see what it's like. And here we have our finished loaf. I wish you could smell it, it smells delicious. Slightly crusty on the outside, but you can really feel it's fresh and soft. I'm going to move it off this baking tray. Oh, there's something amazing about the smell of fresh bread. So, this is our finished product. But as I say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I'm going to cut this open right now. Now, to be honest with you, you really should leave it to cool down a little bit. So I'm going to deny my urge to just tear this fresh bread right apart, and I'm going to allow it about half an hour just to cool down. Sometimes when it's just baked, if you cut into it straight away, it can be a little bit doughy because the inside of the bread needs to have a little time to settle and solidify a little bit with cooling, and it helps. It's easier to digest as well once it's cooled a little bit. And really, the freshest bread straight out of the oven is not the best bread to eat, even though it tastes the nicest. Our stomachs have a little bit of trouble digesting that. So I'm going to leave this bread to cool down for just a few minutes. Oh, so tempting. And then we'll come back, give it a cook, come back, we'll cut it and we'll see what it's like on the inside. Oh man, I just love the smell of fresh bread. Okay, here goes. I mean, I wanted to really open it right up just so you can see just how soft this thing was in the middle. Boom. Boom. Now ideally, really, I should leave this to cool down, but it's just so tempting. But here we are. This is super, super, super soft. Now it will solidify a little bit more as it cools down, but even so, even a day after, 2 days after, it should still be, using this technique, I found that the bread is still very, very soft. There we have it. How to make super soft wholemeal bread. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is TheFlourMan signing off.
TheFlourMan,
Happy
TheFlourMan, you're not ready for TheFlourMan. Look what I've done.